Hello, everybody. We are back in studio, and we are live. It's Mark and I in the studio, and we have a special guest. Mark, why don't you do the big introductions and let them know?
I will. So here we are, our post-primary podcast, and with us today is Representative Brett Guthrie of the 2nd District of Kentucky. Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for waiting for me to get over here. I just ran from the Capitol, and I know we got other things to talk about, but we just voted. Believe it or not, the D.C. City Council has voted to allow non-citizens to vote in city elections. Well, Congress technically governs Washington, D.C. We've overdone a couple of their releasing or allowing people who carjack to get lesser sentences. We've done that.
Oh, my.
And so today we just voted. It's a bill out of the House. It's got to go to the Senate to keep non-citizens from voting in D.C. elections. And nobody can explain to us, nobody can explain in any of these cities doing it, how do you let non-citizens vote in local elections? And if there's a federal or ballot on the same page, how do you keep them from voting in those? And nobody can explain that to us, so we want to get rid of it. It's concerning what's going on at the border.
That's crazy.
Taking advantage of the other side of the aisle, taking advantage of people coming here who are not citizens and not allowed to vote.
I mean, that seems so crazy to, at least to us here in Kentucky, in rural Kentucky. It's, we really feel like, we already had the fear that the Democratic Party was building up illegal migrants here in the state, so that someday they could give them amnesty and allow them to become instantly become citizens. That would then they felt would overflow their ballot boxes. But just to skip that whole step and say we're going to go straight into we're going to give them the right to vote now, it just doesn't make any sense to me, because then anybody can come and take over.
It's allowable under the Constitution. Certainly, D.C. the Congress has the ability to undo this.
Sounds like a Gavin Newsom recommendation. I don't know.
Well, I mean that's where they're going.
Yeah,
that's where we have to be vigilant and to get a handle on this. And so believe me, people aren't just being. They always say you're irrational when you're feeling all this stuff is going to happen. You wouldn't have thought 5 years ago that there would be a city council of any substance anywhere that would allow non-citizens to vote. But when we bring this stuff up, people think, "Oh, you're being ridiculous," but it turns out to be true. Absolutely, turns out to be true. And so Congress is trying to undo. Jamie Comer's committee, as a matter of fact, is the
phenomenal job, by the way, on his committee too.
What is that?
Phenomenal job on his committee as of late.
He's been amazing on it.
Yeah.
I know we have other things we're going to talk about, but if you just want where we are with Joe Biden, if you want to look at that.
Yeah.
So what Jamie Comer first started with, I don't want to take off unless you want me to talk about other things.
Well, this is your time, so we've got you've got as much time as you want to take. So
when we took control, when we took majority, Jamie Comer became chairman of the committee. When we took majority, the conventional wisdom, not the truth, the conventional wisdom was Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian propaganda. Hunter Biden did a legitimate business deal. Nobody he did business with ever met with Joe Biden. And nothing ever occurred while Joe Biden was vice president, and Joe Biden never received any money. That's where we are. We know all the first four are false.
Yeah.
We also know that Joe Biden's brother paid Joe Biden $200,000.
Wow.
And so the question is, so Joe Biden's brother, James Biden, had an account that had a balance of zero. A wire transfer came from one of these suspect companies of Front for Romania, went $200,000 into his brother's account and paid, and they immediately wrote it. So think about that. You have a checking account with nothing. You get a $200,000 check to it, and you immediately write a $200,000 check. That money had to come from that source. There's no other way that it can move. And he says, well, I was only paying back a loan. And so they're going through bank documents, and there's currently no record of any money transferring from Joe Biden to his brother. If he's paying back a loan, There
Yeah.
should have been some money going the other way, and that's where we are right now. And Jamie's doing a good job with it.
Absolutely. So, real quick, I want to say thank you. You were just here not too long ago. You were in Radcliffe, and there was a dedication for the Radcliffe and Baptist Health, that clinic right outside of Fort Knox Gate. You were a tremendous part in that and helping not only the local community of Fort Knox, but the Radcliffe community, and bringing something back along with a Bound Credit Union. But the contributions you were able to help stir from government aid down to state in order to make that possible. I just real briefly, I know we've covered it already in the news, but I just want to give you a highlight and say thank you for that, because that's leading into another project that you're currently working on that I just uncovered the other day. But it looks like we're trying, I know it's a long ways away and it takes a lot of time, but with the emphasis that's going on in Fort Knox, I believe there's another new project to help Fort Knox out, and that's hangar spaces. Could you talk a little bit about that real quick?
Yes, I always say, don't thank me, thank the taxpayer.
Sure.
Yeah.
We thought it was a good use of taxpayer funds for what happened with the hospital.
Yeah.
Because since Fort Knox no longer has a full functioning hospital at Fort Knox,
Yes.
a lot of active duty and a lot of retirees are on the economy.
Yes.
And so we wanted to be convenient to where they live. And I think that was fair to do. And they have a good facility that's right outside the gates of Fort Knox.
Yes.
And so active duty soldiers on post, you know, they do get some services on Fort Knox, but given in our retirement,
Yeah.
a lot of our retirees live in the area. A lot live in Meade County, so it's easier to get to Radcliffe than
That's
it
right.
is to downtown.
Yes, sir.
to Elizabeth.
Or Louisville.
So one of that. The other one is the Air National Guard needs a new hangar so they can put new locations there. We're trying to continue to make Fort Knox indispensable to the defense of our country.
Yeah.
Because we do have a $1.7 trillion budget deficit that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
We have to deal with it, and tough decisions have to be made. And the more missions and the more things that Fort Knox, we have
Yeah.
a 1.7. We have $1 trillion budget deficit. We spend 1.7 trillion on healthcare. That was
Yeah.
the number I was thinking of
Yeah.
quoting.
Right.
But if we have to deal with this, and so we have to look everywhere. But so
Yeah.
we know some parts of the military side are going to have to shrink in the future. We're not going to have the country we have. So the more that you can make Fort Knox indispensable
Yeah.
with the target, with the new range that we have,
Yeah.
the 5th Corps there. A lot of things have happened since I've been in office.
Yes, sir.
And now we're looking at the new hangar so that we can. You know, Fort Knox also doesn't have active duty military only. It also has the National Guard mission,
Right.
and making that even more indispensable. And that's what we're working on. So
Yeah.
that's important.
I'm not gonna. I'm never just on the spending side of things. The government's already taking that tax money, and so anytime that you, as our representative, can get that money to come back to our community,
Oh, yeah.
is a good thing in my opinion. So I really appreciate that you guys are working hard to take care of Kentucky, even though we know we have a long way to go for tax reform and get taxes and all that under control. In the meantime, it's good to make sure that we're getting it back in our community. So thank you for that.
Hopefully it starts January I'm now in a general election race with,
Yep.
which we're going to be working hard on that, but hopefully I'll be back in January. We really want it to be at noon on January 20th
Yeah.
for us to begin really dealing with this budget deficit. And I think President Trump will sit down and try to do what, and he said, you know, he's not going to cut benefits to seniors. And I'm glad that he's put that out there, but we're all going to have to figure out how to grow the economy, but also spend less.
So I got another thing. I just kind of want to say this, but with that focus on Fort Knox, and I don't think a lot of viewers really understand, but that new air range is an air-land combat range, and it is the largest air combat range on this side of the Mississippi, which actually does save the government a lot of money because most of those training facilities are out in the desert on the West Coast. So because we get
And people will be flying in from
Yeah.
you know all over the eastern coast, so it's not just Fort Knox soldiers using
Right.
it. It's the military will bring people in, so it'll help the economy.
Yeah.
It'll do a lot of other good things. Plus, it continues to make Fort Knox
100%.
important and indispensable to the military. But talking about spending, so the one
Exactly.
thing we want to work on spending, and you had a question on what's going on in our colleges. And I know that we had a vote the other day based on what the protests happening on in our college universities.
Right.
And so there was a bill. I know there was a definition that was used, what's in law on anti-Semitism. And I just want to, and people say, well, what if I, proclaim my religion and it's viewed as being, anti-Semitic. And So nobody is affected individually by this law. What it says is if you don't protect Jewish students who are on campuses to go to school, the same way you to protect other students, then you don't get federal funding. So all we want to say, what the purpose of the bill was, and there's no individual penalty, so they can't go after a church, you can't go after an individual,
Right.
you can't go after anyone. But if the university does not maintain a campus where Jewish people can go to school and feel safe, then they should not get. It's amazing how much federal dollars go to places like Harvard and Yale and a lot of other schools. And all we're saying is that you just have to provide a safe space for people to go to school, and you can't, you can't treat people in the way that's being treated. And the definitions of anti-Semitism, I know, is from previous law, and some people have concern that, well, if you proclaim the different religious beliefs, you could be viewed as anti-Semitic. If you, and so we're sensitive to that. But the only, I don't know, punishment's the right word, but the only consequence of this bill was that you have to be a university, you can't be an individual, and the university would not receive funding.
Well, some people have conveyed that it's their worry is that it's a slippery slope. That once we get into this and we start trying to define it, we know that obviously the left has defined it very they've basically chosen not to define anti-Semitism so that they can basically say everything's anti-Semitic or not anti-Semitism. And so now that we're trying to define it to bring some balance, a lot of folks are worried that it's a slippery slope, that once you go down that trail, it becomes right now nobody's going to use it against a Christian, but what happens in 10, 15 years, maybe, things happen and you see people start to, maybe, somebody starts coming down on Notre Dame or something like that because, of their Catholic principles.
Right. You're right. Because, if you say that if you're a Catholic university and your premise is, Jesus Christ is the way to heaven, is that if you say there's no other way, then is that being anti-Semitic, anti-religious? This doesn't deal with it. It just doesn't deal with that. And we always have to be vigilant, but you can't not protect students on campus today because what some future Congress may do. So we have to deal with what Congress is before us. But I would argue that if you made any religious claims such as you can't make your religious statement, that violates the First Amendment.
Yeah,
anyway.
and I think that
a lot of other.
I think everybody agrees with you.
Sanctioned to put in jail, but universities that have a hostile campus are not, and people are being hostile.
I agree.
I'm sorry.
No, that talking point is important because there was tons of media coverage. I don't care which platform you're on, but they were rehearsing for these protests for conflict. They weren't rehearsing for protesting, which is the way the nation had built the First Amendment. They were rehearsing for conflict and to actually create conflict within these school campuses.
It's a great point.
I think that once you see that, that's when we got to step in. No, this is not how you get to act on college campus.
This just wasn't like saying that you're, Israel is putting forth genocide. That's not even that.
Yeah.
It is that they were physically restraining, physically abusing. They were not giving physical protection to people who are Jewish or people who a lot of people who are Christians side with Israel. Most people I know side with Israel. Most people I know are Christians. And so it can affect a lot of people. And so we have to make sure that these universities, they want it all the ways. They allow people to protest if it's a certain viewpoint. And I think most people who pay taxes should be just tired of the way these universities are behaving. And if you're not going to have an open environment where people can learn and can study from all political perspectives and all religious views, then I don't think they should get taxpayer dollars. And that was the intent of that bill.
100% agree.
I understand that people are concerned about the concern and what some future Congress can do. But as long as I'm in Congress, I'm going to honor the First Amendment.
Amen.
And I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. So.
Good.
And I know we're getting tied on time. I know we want to talk about Ukraine as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's go ahead and transition.
It's a perfect transition. Yeah, because
I hate to have a quick transition into that, but I voted to support Ukraine, and let me tell you, here's my reasoning. And there have been a lot of great people who brought a lot of things to my attention. So my big question was, that I always asked, was what happened if Ukraine falls? if Ukraine falls to Russia. Now you've got Putin, who's had a success under his belt, who is now trained on, he's got to go through Belarus, I get it, but up in the north he doesn't. He's got Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Now Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia were Soviets. They were literally part of the Soviet Union. And he said he wants to recreate the Russian Empire. And the Russian Empire included Poland and Finland. And that's what he says. And so is he if we just didn't help Ukraine, was he going to stop there? And I was in a Republican meeting in Ohio County, and a guy asked me, and it was a fair question. I don't think people ask dumb questions. Like, every question's a great question. He says, well, when I explained what I just said, he says, do you really believe Vladimir Putin would attack a NATO country?
Yes.
And my point is, he said he would.
Yeah.
And whether he would or wouldn't, we would have to prepare like he would. And a lot of people, so Meade County is close to Fort Knox, as we're just discussing. You probably know people or serve with people who are in the 5th Corps. The 5th Corps is a European-based corps whose headquarters is at Fort Knox, and a lot of people are in Poland today. There will be a lot more in 5th Corps than 5th Corps in Poland if Ukraine were to fall.
Yeah.
And so what's the end game? Then there's a fair question. So I always talk about the 1930s and Hitler, and Hitler said, I want all of Eastern Europe, but then he tried to negotiate just to get, a section of Czechoslovakia, the Sudetenland where they spoke German. And people said, well, they're German speakers, let's let him have that and he'll stop. Well,
he didn't.
Maybe he'll stop, but we got to prepare like he won't. And then so the question is, so when I quoted the 1930s, we have brilliant people that show up to these meetings because somebody said, well, you can't quote the 1930s if you don't talk about the 1960s. And what about the quagmire that we got into in Vietnam? And how do we avoid getting into a quagmire? And that's a fair point. I don't think we're there yet. I think if we would have pulled out, Ukraine would fall. And if we would not pull out, we didn't help.
Sure.
Ukraine would fall. And then we would have this issue of having to put more troops in Europe like we had in the 1980s and 90s. And so there needs to be a negotiated settlement. It can't come on forever.
Yeah.
But Putin's not going to negotiate if he thinks we're going to pull out. He's not going to negotiate if he's moving forward. So if we can get back to where it's static, or maybe even push back like Ukraine did before, then it leads to the diplomatic settlement we all want. But I thought we would never get to a diplomatic settlement if we didn't help. The second point that is absolutely valid is that why doesn't Europe do more?
Yeah, that's a great point.
A lot of people complain that, so you hear people on the news that because Speaker Johnson and the Republicans in the House held up this aid for 6 months. We didn't hold it up. We wanted to make sure we got it right. And we got it, and it's your taxpayer dollars, as I said. So there are two things. One, we send military aid, so most of the money actually spent, we don't just give them cash. We say, here is $30 billion, and they can send tanks, they can send artillery shells, they can send other things that are of that value. We don't give them cash. There is some cash for, their economy's just crushed because everybody's fighting a war. And so it helps them. That was set up as a loan. That's what President Trump requested. So it took us a while to get it because we wanted to get it right. And I always said this, if all else fails, let's at least keep Ukraine alive until President Trump becomes president and let him do what he did. Remember, I'm going to get back to why did Putin attack? Putin attacked, in my view, because the Obama-Biden administration, when he went into Crimea, did nothing.
Yeah.
Did literally nothing. Remember, they said, we don't want blankets, we want bullets.
Yeah.
They didn't support them. President Trump came into power, and now they're all blaming the Republicans for all this, but President Trump came into office and
Not
gave
a
them
peep.
Javelin missiles.
Yeah.
They would have taken Kyiv, in my military opinion, if they didn't have the equipment the Trump administration had sent to Ukraine. And I don't know why President Trump doesn't get credit for that. I don't know why he doesn't take credit for that.
Well, we all know why Trump doesn't get credit for a lot of things, but anyway.
Yeah.
Well, the phone call that Vladimir Zelensky that he got impeached over was talking about delivering the javelins, and even Vladimir Zelensky, when the trial was going on, said that he did not feel any pressure from that phone call to do an investigation. He dismissed everything that Adam Schiff was saying.
Yeah.
Of course, Adam Schiff at the time, who holds Vladimir Zelensky up as, and I think he's fought a brave fight. I give Vladimir Zelensky credit for what's going on, but Adam Schiff, who holds him up now as higher than anybody, was saying that, well, he just felt the pressure, and he wouldn't turn his back on President Trump. So essentially said Vladimir Zelensky didn't tell the truth. They didn't felt pressure. We see how tough this guy is. Do you think you don't think he told what he thought was the truth about President Trump? Wow. It's funny how Democrats use Vladimir Zelensky when he's in their benefit, and they throw him the other way when they're not. But having said that, that's why I think if we can keep him to when President Trump gets into power and give the opportunity for us to have some kind of settlement that President Trump's capable of doing. Well, the other thing that made Putin attack, if you think about it, one, Obama-Biden did nothing to help when he attacked Crimea, which is Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And then he saw the absolute disaster of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And in the disaster, the decision that Biden made in Afghanistan and the way that they completely failed in pulling it off, they made a bad decision, made it worse by the way they executed it. I think that just gave Putin the backbone to say, well,
let me ask you.
There's a lot of things.
Let me ask you a question, Brett, on this from a military perspective. I agree with you on everything you said about Trump. You have to show a deterrence in order to deter these types of actions. We had that with our military under President Trump. We had backbone, as they called it, right? And if you're a listener and you don't know Brett's background, he's a West Point graduate, so he might know a little bit about military history and warfare. They study it like nobody's business in West Point Academy. Plus, in his military service, they also teach it at almost every leadership level, all the way up to the academies for the officers. But what I want to point out is that when we move forward, if Trump comes in office, when Trump comes back in office, because that's what it looks like from the polls, if Trump can get the support to Ukraine and they can shut it down, because obviously if Ukraine has been able to defend Russia is not that big of a ground force threat in my mind based off of what we've seen. I know you probably agree to that, but the real problem is that Georgia and Ukraine have long been wanting to become part of NATO. I don't think we should be threatened anymore to let them and worry about Putin's threats of, he's going to destroy that country, because he's had almost well over a year to try to destroy Ukraine. Do you think that would be a future opportunity that we should shoot for, so we just remove ourselves from these situations in the future?
Well, so I'm not ready to say that Ukraine or Georgia should be part of NATO. There are observers. I'm on a NATO committee. Yeah. And the reason is it does bound us to send American men and women if they attack. And I'm not ready, and I don't think most of America is ready to send American men and women to fight for Ukraine today. Physically, that's why I think it's important we support them where we are. So I think we should absolutely support Ukraine to bring them in the alliance where it triggers that we have to send our men and women into battle. We're there with Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. They are in the alliance.
Yeah,
right. We do have a treaty to say that we have to send our American men and women. And so I think we need to be careful when we expand NATO, just because the implications of bringing our men and women forward. But I kind of got ahead of myself. So in the gap between the last 6 months Ukraine has not run out of money. People keep saying because of Speaker Johnson's deliberate and measured way of responding,
right,
that's put Ukraine in a bad situation. They never ran out of money. And this is what people need to understand. Germany and Europe has stood in the breach. And they put over 100 billion euros into Ukraine, and they absolutely should have. And if we had sent the money in October like they were asking for, I don't believe they would have. And so by us being deliberate, it's forced Europe to stand tall. But the problem, and I'm an old artilleryman, is that Russia can outproduce the West in artillery shells. So even though Ukraine had the money for artillery shells, now they're getting more artillery. We're paying for more artillery shells. They're not getting the money, but we still can't make them as fast as Russia can make them, and that has completely exposed. So a part of this Ukraine package is so they keep saying it's $60 billion for Ukraine. It's actually $30 billion in military equipment for Ukraine. The other $30 billion is for us to rebuild our military infrastructure that the Obama
So that we can manufacture again.
Completely let lapse. And President Trump was trying to strengthen it, and hopefully coming in January. But that's what we're trying to do, is rebuild our fleet. So I know the two big things we want to talk about tonight, and I know I'm going to have to, I got another meeting I got to run to, but is that the definitions in the law I passed about the anti-Semitic actions on campus is only funding from your tax dollars that go to these, most of them elite, self-appointed elite, I would say,
right,
universities, if they don't protect all students and they allow instances of anti-Semitism on campus. That's all that affects. And mindful of the slippery slope, but that's what that affects. And the other one is, I do believe if Ukraine had fallen, we would have to spend more money in Europe than we're spending now. And by keeping Ukraine alive, if we do, they stay alive, which I believe they will until next January, because what this, and then I know I'm getting another subject, but it's tied to this, what this administration has done, if you think about a colossal failure in foreign policy, our two biggest rivals in terms of military might or economic might, Russia and China, not really Russia on the economy, have united now. They're uniting. I'm not saying
I was going to bring that up earlier because it strengthened their relationship.
And we have allowed that to happen by our State Department. They're inept, and it has real consequences because they think people should behave like they want them to behave. They always criticize Trump for trying to make relationship with President Xi of China. I had him in Mar-a-Lago, trying to make a relationship with President Putin, and even trying to make a relationship with Kim Jong-un. And they're saying, well, he's doing it like nobody does it. That's not how diplomacy is supposed to happen. He didn't pull it off with Kim Jong-un, but he certainly didn't have the nuclear test that he's doing now.
Yeah.
He didn't pull it off with Xi, but he didn't have him uniting with Russia, and he didn't pull it off with Putin completely. But he didn't have Putin going into another European country over across their border. And so this intellectual, self-appointed, elite, Ivy League thinking is disastrous. It's proven to be completely disastrous for the world. And let me finish with it. So I don't want to do all the talking, but I do have to go. But I was talking to a European, another member of parliament for Britain, and they were talking about President Trump. And I said, isn't it funny, Europeans don't like President Trump, but they sure loved Europe. The way the situation in Europe when President Trump was president.
Yeah.
And he goes, you know what, that's a really good way to look at it. And we need to explain that more to my colleagues.
Yeah. Well, Brett, I know you have to go.
I got one quick question. Congressman Guthrie, what is the best news source in Meade County?
The best news source in Meade County, where you're listening to it right now.
That's right, the Messenger.
Paper.
That's right. Go ahead, Mark.
So the best. I appreciate you purchasing that.
Yeah.
So
Truth is the best news source in Meade County.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. So Brett, I know you're going to be traveling around. You're going to be back home soon, right?
Yes, we're going to be in Meade County. I think it's next week.
Okay, good. We're looking forward to hopefully we can get together and
excited to see you.
And and Brett, you're always welcome to come on this show anytime 100%. You want. We're not, hopefully we don't just give you softball questions. We want to ask the questions that people are asking us and make sure that that's getting out there, and not just ask you in private, but so that you have an opportunity to talk to it. And I think that's an important thing. I think that you've always been fair and open to us. Everywhere I've gone, people have said that the one thing they like about you the most is the fact that you seem to be accessible, that people can actually come and talk to you.
That's right.
Well, I'll sure listen, because I know everybody doesn't agree with me. Actually, I probably would want everybody to agree with me, and I really don't. But when people do disagree, I'm glad that they ask.
That's right.
Because it allows me to explain, and because I think reflexively, people are like concerned about why are we spending money in Europe when we don't really have an interest. If you don't really ask the next question, well, we do have an interest in terms of, NATO and NATO countries and Putin's threat to other NATO countries. And if you separate those two, it isolates Ukraine. Says that's their war. People can make that claim, but I'm just afraid it's going to drag us in and cost a lot more money than we're spending now.
Yeah.
And I do think the Calvary's coming in January.
Yeah, I do
we're
too.
Gonna have a different scenario, hopefully. My goodness.
Our voter turnout yesterday was not very good here in Kentucky at all. I think we got to 13% or something like that, 14%.
Yeah.
Overall, Meade County was really light. So,
Brett, you're
strong, particularly in our battleground states in this fall.
Yeah.
Brett, your final thoughts and going into the general election, and we'll give you your time back. We appreciate you, but give us your final thoughts going into the election.
Well, I do believe I think we're gonna win the Senate. I think West Virginia is a given. So at worst, we're tied. There's not really a Republican seat that's on the. They keep saying Ted Cruz in Texas.
Right.
There's no way. I think that he doesn't win that re-election. Now we've got red state places that Trump's going to do well. President Trump's going to do well in Montana. He's going to do well in Ohio. Michigan's in play. Maryland's in play.
Yes, sir.
And so there's a
New Hampshire's in play.
New Hampshire's in play, and we are far more likely to have 3 or 4 votes lead in the Senate than we are not to have the Senate at all. And so the House, I think if the election were held today, we're going to hold the House. I mean, I know people in Meade County get it and understand it, but across the country, how poorly President Biden is doing, and he's not exuding any confidence. And it is if we have the election today, I think we have a 2-vote majority in the House. We need more.
Yeah.
We could be 15 to 20 vote majority. We win the Senate, and I absolutely believe President Trump will win the presidency if the vote was taken today. We just got to make sure that we work as hard as we can and make it happen in November.
Yeah. So, thank you again. Thank you for coming on. And we'll go ahead and wrap up because I know sometimes it's hard to get away from these conversations, but
so I appreciate it. Hey, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming on. And I think we're going to switch gears here in a second and start talking about the results for a few minutes from yesterday. And then, Brett, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're a busy man, and it's always great to hear from you.
We will see you next week.
We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks, Brett. All right. It's always good to hear from our representatives and such. So
I honestly thought that was a great interview, especially because it's nice because he gives us the behind the scenes, and we're not stuck to like a TV station where you only get to hear like the
blurb.
Blurb.
We get to hear, and we can ask him questions about the background, and he's willing to tell us.
Yeah, he would have stopped. If he didn't have a time and a schedule, he would have probably talked to us for like an hour. But I just appreciate getting him on and our audio working so everybody can hear it.
Yeah, that's always we've had challenges in the past, but this was a good. I think this was a good one, and I think that and I think he'll come on again and again. Yeah. It'd be great if we can get him in studio one time. In the near future, hopefully as the election rolls near, maybe we can get him into Meade County and
absolutely
we can put him on live here in the studio for a little bit. Mm-hmm. But let's talk a little bit about the election results yesterday.
I think so. Absolutely. Let's get into it, Mark.
So yesterday, we had the Kentucky primary. I think it's absolutely it was absolutely no shock at all that Donald Trump won the Republican nomination here with 85% of the vote.
But it does still, the concern I have about that, he got 85% of the vote, 15% voted for other people because they didn't, obviously didn't drop off. I don't know if we had the up or down report, like they didn't vote at all or whatever.
So we have an uncommitted line on it as well. So the uncommitted line was 4% of the vote. About just under 9,000 Republicans chose not to vote for any of the. But if you look over at Joe Biden, Biden was 18%. Did not vote uncommitted.
Right. So if you take that 18% and the other, how much will that impact in the general election if they vote for Kennedy?
I mean, Kennedy was, because you don't even see Kennedy in these numbers right now because he's running on a different party, on a different ticket. But so of the Democrats that came to the polls yesterday, Joe Biden only received 71%.
Yeah. And
that's a concern. I saw that it was in my notes from when I was going through the results yesterday, but then I heard it on the news last night on KET when they were going over their results, and then I heard it again I think on Fox News this morning that 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 number, and they were talking specifically about Kentucky, because Kentucky, I think, were we end up being the only one that had an election yesterday, a primary yesterday?
Yep.
We really got to figure out if we can move that. I know that the parties don't really want us to, but we've got to get ourselves moved up in the schedule. There's no reason for us to wait till the end of May.
No, we should have been doing it
at this
in,
point.
March,
April. But it is difficult for the candidates to get to all the states, so spreading them out helps them with their campaigning. But at the same time, it's like, come on, you can't leave us hanging out here at the end of May.
Nope.
I mean, we've already had our state convention.
I would tell you, I think that everybody should vote on the same day, just like we do the general election. All the primaries should be held on the same day, and then we're done.
Yeah.
You go make your rounds for the year up until the primary day, and everybody's done.
I mean, each state gets to pick that. And
I get it.
But so I believe in a range. I think it's okay that Iowa and them all go first up front. But for us here in Kentucky, being in late May it kind of pushes us completely out of the focus of anyone, and it's hard for us to drive voter turnout. We had, I think, the overall voter turnout for yesterday, statewide, I think got to about 14%, something like that. I was trying to find that here, but I guess I don't see that on this page that I'm looking at. But it is definitely here it is. It is 12.71%. So it didn't even make it to 13%. 12.71% statewide. Meade County was 11.31%. And I get it. Everybody looks at it and says, hey, well, it wouldn't have changed anything for me to go vote. But the one thing it does change is it helps give more confidence and to your candidates, to make sure that they know that you've got their back, that they're willing to push forward, and they know that that not just with your vote, but that you're more likely to give them financial backing and things, because it takes a lot of money to run campaigns, especially a nationwide campaign. I mean, you look at what they spend on like a governor's race in Kentucky, or heck, you just look at what people spend on a local election, like a judge executive or what have you. We figure that a judge executive race probably, a decent race is run between $20,000 and $30,000. And some have spent as much as $50,000 or more on that race. You could say the same thing about your state reps. It takes money, and a lot of and people say, well, why do they just pay it for themselves? Well, it costs a lot of money to advertise. It costs a lot of money to put, not just to run the ads, but to put the ads together. You have to have, graphic artists. You have to have, you're trying to, you get a lot of volunteers that go out and knock on doors. And here in Meade County, a lot of our local elections are run off of volunteers that have talent, and they loan their talent to the campaigns. You might have somebody who's a graphic artist. Well, they can do the graphic work for multiple candidates, and we try to find that as a party. We try to find those folks and share them out and say and ask them if they, and most of the time they're willing to help. But anyway, back to the results. I mean, in Meade County, we had really just two races on the Republican side. And there were two races on the Democrat side. So the two races for Meade County on the Republican side were the Republican nominee for president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, won with 90% of the vote in Meade County. That was a total of 1,509 votes out of 1,668 cast. The second place was Nikki Haley with 3%. Uncommitted was another 3%. So that was uncommitted was the third. Ron DeSantis came in with 2%. Vivek Ramaswamy had 8 votes, so it didn't really didn't make it to the percentage. So it's that's like just a fraction of a percent. Ryan Binkley again also 0%. He had 6 votes, and then Chris Christie garnered 4 votes. And again, didn't make it, no percentage there. And if you look down at the state senator, the state senate race for the 5th. Meade County is part of is one of 5 counties in the 5th senatorial district. And in Meade County, Stephen Meredith defeated Thomas Ballinger with 69% to 31% of the vote. 1,625 ballots were cast in that race. And again, there's about 43 votes that didn't get cast in that race that were cast in the presidential race. So there was 43 undervotes there. But 1,125 votes for Stephen Meredith and 500 votes total for Thomas Ballinger. And then if you want to just to flip over on the presidential side, Joe Biden had about 59% of the vote in Meade County. 23% of the vote was uncommitted. 9% went to Marianne Williamson, and 9% went to Dean Phillips. So, but there were only 911 votes cast on the Democratic side of Meade County. So, and then the final race that happened in Meade County was the United States representative in Congress for the 2nd congressional district. This will be the Democrat that will run against Brett Guthrie, who we just heard from. Hank Linderman garnered 57% of the vote, and William Dakota Compton took up 43%. So again, there were 873 total votes cast in that election. Again, it's there was probably 873 votes in that. There were 38 votes 38 voters voted for president in the Democratic side, but did not vote for their congressional 2nd district congressman. So, but I mean, overall, I'm really disappointed with our turnout. It's hard to, again, part of the problem is that it's late May. People are already starting to think about the vacation. School's wrapping up. I really think that, if we could at least get into April, it would be a better turnout.
Yeah.
Get people thinking about this a little bit, a little easier to get them thinking about it. But I think overall, we're proving to be still a strong conservative Republican county. Our voter registration is at 23,000 even. We are looking at these numbers, and we continue to move up in registration on the Republican side of the aisle here. So, but we need to figure out how to get people to come vote. Now, I think that this is going to turn around big time when we come to vote in November. So
here's what I had an interesting conversation today. Went to the doctor. I meet with the nurse, and I said, "So did you vote?" She said, "Nope, I sure didn't." And I said, is there a reason why you didn't vote? And she said, "Yeah, I just don't care anymore. I just don't care anymore." She didn't want to vote because she didn't like either of the candidates. She didn't want to just vote for the lesser of two evils because both have a black eye for whatever reason or however they're portrayed between all of the media sources, and they don't know what to believe. And it got me to thinking, if it was mandatory to vote, what would it be like in a primary where multiple people were interested because everybody had to vote? I honestly could see a nation where you paid higher property taxes if you didn't vote. You know what I mean? If you actually voted, then you get a discount. You get a discount on your property tax. I don't know.
If you don't own property, do you get a vote?
Yeah,
I mean,
that
takes us back. That's a slippery slope, man.
Whatever it would take to enforce people to do their civic duty, because in my opinion, you can't just count on the low voter turnout to win an election, right? In this situation,
even then, you're looking at what you have to do is look at the fact that the low voter turnout is not necessarily like, you have to look at it and as a sample, right? it's like you're almost like you're just doing a sample of the election. So you're looking at 11% turnout. The Republican Party, I think, had a better turnout than the Democratic Party did overall. If you do the numbers, it's like 11,700 Republicans in the county. And if you look at just the numbers for that turned out and voted for President of the United States, 1,668. So 1,668 divided by the 11,800.
Here, let me give you an example. How many people voted in the Senator Meredith race?
So in the Senate,
The total for both
Senate,
sides when you add up
1,625 Republicans. I can't tell you what the Democrats were though, because
I don't need that.
1,625.
I got it. But for 162,000, well, hold on. I don't even need to spend 162,000. If I just took 1,000 voters times $100, and I offered a $100 gift card to go vote to everybody who goes vote that said they would vote for me, and offer them a $100 gift card, my campaign would have cost me $100,000, and I'd be guaranteed the Senate race because only 2,000 people show up to vote. Over the years,
except for the fact that you'd be arrested.
I got that.
Right.
I got that. But if somebody else paid them a $100 gift card to go and vote, or whatever, I don't know. I'm just saying it seems very easy to buy an election. I'm not saying that this election. Hold on, let me rephrase. I'm not saying that anybody did anything illegal in this election. Doing this would be illegal, but my point is you could, when there's only a small sum of people, and the same people are always the ones who go and vote, it would be a lot easier to find all of those people and then somehow convince them to sway their vote.
Well, I mean,
somehow.
Listen, I mean, when we went to campaign school, they said 15% of the people have already made up their mind, and they at that point they said that it was equally distributed between the Republican and Democratic Party, so that you can't really sway those people. But they've already made up their mind when they got out of bed 3 months ago, 6 months ago,
True.
a year ago.
True.
Right. Yep. So, or right after the primary, basically. Yeah. So when the 85% of the people don't even know who they like or don't even really know the candidates until 2 to 3 weeks prior to the election.
Yeah.
That's when they care. And so then they show up and say, okay, well, I need to go out and vote. And then in a presidential election like we're going to get this year, it's going to be like 50%. Yeah. You know, so in November we might get to 55, 60%. Mm-hmm. That would be considered a really good turnout for an election.
Yeah.
But you're still only looking at about 11,500 people is 50%. So you're looking at maybe 12,500 people coming out to vote. Mm-hmm. And making a decision for a 30,000 a population of 30,000 people. So 25% of our population determines what, even in the best years.
Right.
Now, of course, you think about your voting age. Mm-hmm. I think it's 78% of the people in our population, around 78% of them are voting age or older. Right. So,
right.
So right there, you're already at about 25%, almost 25% of the people can't even vote. So, anyway, so the point is that how do we get people to go vote? And I'm not just asking you and I, Steve. I'm asking the people out there that are watching.
Absolutely.
What do we need to do to encourage people to go vote? I mean, it's not. I mean, old ways don't seem to matter. Mm-hmm. People don't trust anything they hear anymore or see anymore.
That's right.
Heck, it's hard even for me to believe everything that I see and hear in the focus that I put on it. Mm-hmm. And because I don't watch hardly any regular television anymore. because I trust I don't trust anybody in the news to give me a straight story.
We literally flip between multiple news channels. I usually will revert to BBC if I want to know what's going on over in Jerusalem, because all of it is op-ed stuff and CNN and the MSNBC.
Well, BBC is too.
Yeah, well, some of it is, but when they're covering like live footage of the war or what's going on, that's when I like to watch, because you're getting live reporting of situations on the ground, I guess.
No, I get that. I get that part of it. So that's what I look for as well. I'm looking for the live reports so I can say, oh, what's going on? Yeah. But it almost immediately turns over to commentary. Yeah. And it's like, oh, this wouldn't have happened if President Trump had done this, and this 2 years ago, because they're trying to make sure that Biden wins. Yeah. Right. It happens every day. And it's like, guys, just tell me what happened. Will the what caused it has more to do with the people who are actually in it.
That's right.
Than the people that were voted in 4 years ago. So anyway, let's get hey. Thank you all for coming out and joining us today. We had a great time with Congressman Guthrie.
And there's a lot of information, so you got to listen to what he said.
Yeah.
There are some facts that came out. We're not just doing a discussion. Specifically about the Biden case that's going on with Comer in the House. I think that it's phenomenal when we get him on here, like you're saying, Mark, because you're getting stuff as it's updated, and you're not going to get that from the news.
And if you guys send us a question you have for one of our leaders, or it doesn't have to be just Brett Guthrie, it'll be any of them that we come in contact with, anybody that we have on this show, or anybody that we just happen to meet at an event or what have you. We're not afraid to ask those questions and let people know, let them know what you're thinking. So let us know, and if you don't feel like you can get through to them, or you don't feel comfortable doing that, let us know. Text it to us, email it to us, whatever it takes.
100%.
And we will try to make sure that that's asked of our leaders. So I think it's the least that we can expect. But thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for those that did go vote yesterday. Thank you so much for your vote. But we need to get out and work hard. We need to send a message in November. We need to get out and make sure that President Trump is elected. Be prepared to go and vote, to not vote, but to go and help voters, help get the vote out in other counties and other states, rather. So help these candidates go win. Get behind them. Call your family in those areas. Let them know that, hey, we need their help to get these people elected. So,
hey, one more thing. You see the hat right in front of Mark? They are for sale. That is the Messenger logo. It's actually Made Media Group logo. The Messenger KY is just one of its assets. So if you're looking for a new look with a big M on the front of it, come see us, Mark.
All right, guys. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week,
where you can get the truth, the mead truth.
That's right.
Right here from the Messenger Studios.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.